All right, it is another Tuesday afternoon, and it is once again time for us to have our office half hour together. This is still Jessica. You are still you. And I am going to start with something that I've been thinking about recently. And it's not exactly news, right? But maybe we haven't talked about it before. So I want to shed a little bit of light on this, and it kind of is a little bit, it ties into, I guess, what you might say is my origin story as the world's most productive nurse practitioner. So, once upon a time, I decided to get a master's in public health, and I had actually always intended to combine that with having a master's in nursing and working as a nurse practitioner. So, having the what I describe as the micro of the one-on-one direct patient encounter, combining that with the macro of population-based health, right? So MSN, NPH, put them together, right? That was the plan. And that's the reality too. That is kind of how I'm living my professional life. In the process of getting that master's in public health, I needed to do a practicum, right? Not unusual, all makes sense so far, right? And I had a connection in the patient experience department of the local healthcare system. And they had said, this person who was the vice president of patient experience at the time said, "Oh, when you're ready to do the practicum, let me know. I've got something in mind. I think it would be a great fit." So, okay, great. So we did that, and it ended up being a research project. And it was great. It was great from the perspective of doing a practicum, it was great from the perspective of doing qualitative research and observational research, and everything that that entails. And the literature review and the presentation and all this stuff, right? So that was all great. But it left me feeling kind of like, right? It was like that head scratch moment. And I think it's important. Communication, words have always been a big part of anything that I've done, right? Whether it's professional, personal, volunteer, before I was a nurse, since I've become a nurse, all of these things, communication has always been a big part of it. So that was a big draw for me in working on this specific project for my practicum. We were looking at the way that providers communicate with patients and the impact that that has on patient satisfaction scores, really, right? And okay, that's important. And it can identify some opportunities for retraining or blind spots, maybe that clinicians weren't even aware that they had. So I was working in ambulatory settings with primarily like family medicine and peds, but also some specialty stuff too. So we had a pretty decent, cross section of providers that we worked with and patients that they were working with. And it was illuminating. It was great. It was great from my school's perspective, right? And from my practicum's perspective, also from the organization, the sponsoring organization. So that was all good. But after the fact, I thought, well, and actually during, I had this conversation with a couple of the providers during this process, who's looking at the provider experience? How can you look at the patient experience without looking at the provider experience? It's only half of the equation. I can understand the institutional motivation for looking at patient experience, and I can understand why there is a reliance, maybe an over reliance, but why there's a reliance on patient satisfaction scores and surveys. I think there are definitely better ways, right? But I get it. Like I totally get it. There's a very strong customer service focus to healthcare, right, wrong, otherwise. That is the reality. But it's so unfair to me, right? If we only look at the patient side of it, the customer side of it, what our context is such a huge part of anything we do, whether it is working with colleagues, whether it is going to a conference, whether it is working with patients, whether it is conducting research, interpreting research, anything that we do as healthcare providers, as clinicians, context makes a huge difference. If you are a bystander to a car accident and you're going to go and help, right? But you're not going to maybe be as prepared as you would if you worked in the emergency room, or if you were dealing with that same patient when they were brought to the emergency room, because there's skill sets, tools, services, everything that is, even the ergonomics, right, are going to be a little bit better in that setting. The context makes a huge difference. You're still going to go and help that, bystander, from the bystander perspective of car accident, but the context makes a huge difference. So why would we look? That's a big limitation of the research that I did. Why would we look at only half of the equation? It might make sense to look at half of the equation for that round of study, but subsequent rounds of study are completely necessary to really fully understand. Different providers with different backgrounds, different skill sets, different levels of experience, different clinical settings, different clinical demands are going to have completely different experiences in that provider communication. A lot of the scores that we had, which was, something that factored into the work that we did, a lot of the scores that we had were higher in specialty. And, this is a fairly small set, right? So we're talking about, I think, 130 in that neighborhood of providers. So a fairly small N, right, for research buffs out there. But the scores were anecdotally higher among specialty medicine. And in a lot of specialties, it's a short visit. Ophthalmology, I know, is 15 minutes. Cardiology can run a little longer. They sometimes get 30 minutes, right? Dermatology seems like they get 5 minutes. I think dermatology typically, in my experience, has been about 15 minutes, but they're so often double booked. They see a ton of patients in each day. So they're seeing all these people. I know it's not uncommon for dermatology, for example, because in my area anyway, it's very, very short staffed. Not uncommon for dermatology to see 30 to 50 patients in a day. And in some specialty ophthalmology practices, 40, also very typical. Well, how could that be? What's the context, right? Why is that you can be looking at this patient satisfaction information, right? That is giving these higher scores in these specialty settings, and they're cranking through the visits, right? They're seeing all these people. They're seeing them in, almost no time whatsoever, seeing a ton of people showing with these high satisfaction scores. And then you look at the primary care on the flip side, and everybody hates primary care, right? The people in primary care, the providers are frustrated and burnt out. The patients feel like they're, never really getting answers or results and things like that. Maybe because their expectations haven't been properly addressed, right? Primary care is incremental. We don't really cure anything in one shot unless it's like earwax removal. There's not a lot in primary care where we're going to see like final results in like one visit. That's less typical. Primary care is incremental. And I don't know, a lot of patients maybe don't understand that instinctively, or are not philosophically on board with that. When I go to the eye doctor, when I go to ophthalmology and I get my prescription, I'm uncomplicated. I don't have, I don't have glaucoma. I'm not diabetic. So I'm a simple refraction. They dilate, they look at the back of my eye, everything's good. I get a new eyeglass prescription pretty much every time. And that's kind of it, right? It's black and white. I don't have a million questions. It's relatively quick. I'm a simple visit. So I don't know if that's a big piece of it, right? But that's a factor for sure. Where ophthalmology, when you go there, yeah, there's a bunch of different diagnoses that fall under that umbrella of ophthalmology, and there are things that can get discovered in the context of an ophthalmology visit, right? But they're not going to treat the diabetes. If they see somebody with cottonwool spots, they're going to say, you need to talk to your primary care provider, who's then going to probably send you to endo. They're going to make that referral. They're going to do what they can to kind of connect those dots, but they're not going to treat the diabetes. They might see you more often than another patient, right? They're going to refract you every year, I hope. But they're not going to be seeing you every month or every couple of weeks or every 3 months even, right? That's not what it is. So does that context make a big difference? And if it makes a difference from the patient satisfaction side of things, if we work that equation backwards, how does that impact the provider satisfaction? To my knowledge, in my own personal experience and in the experience of the clients that I've worked with, I don't think that a real provider satisfaction survey has been conducted. They're not routinely done. We get anonymous employee satisfaction surveys. And I think that people are generally not comfortable being candid with those, or they may not have time to give that information. So how do we assess provider satisfaction? First of all, why don't we? Why don't we do that regularly? Why is that not routine? And if it is routine in your practice, or you know of a place where it is, comment on that. Tell me about that, because we need more of that out there, right? We need to look at provider satisfaction. We need to get that baseline assessment, and then we need to make a plan and roll it out. And then we need to do follow-ups, right? And then we need to see where we need to adjust the plan. And we need to have this be this concerted effort. And you know why? Burnout. Are you burnt out? I was, right? I feel like I only pulled out of my own burnout maybe 6 months ago, maybe more like 3 months at this point, which is in my case, so it was about 2 years that I was feeling that. And it was awful. It was awful. And when you look at these issues of context and you think about something like burnout, how does that impact the context of care? How does that impact the patient satisfaction? How does that impact the provider satisfaction, right? If we can get early indicators on these things, just like any chronic condition, right? If we can get that A1C when it's starting to look a little like it's just over the line, or like a 6.5, let's put some lifestyle stuff, right, into the mix so that we can get that A1C down. We don't need to start you on medication, right? We can just get you moving a little bit more, maybe eating a little bit better, and see if that's enough, right? And for a lot of people it is, if we catch it in time. Why don't we do the same thing with provider satisfaction? Why don't we say, you look like you're about to get burnt out? I can see that on the horizon. Let's do something about that first. Let's do some lifestyle, the equivalent of lifestyle modifications for providers. That is something that's, I think, really missing in our profession. And I don't know why. I really don't know why. When there are, I don't even really have a theory, right? There's no hypothesis, there's no theory. All I'm doing is raising my hand and saying, this doesn't look right. And this was years ago that I did this practicum and said, how can you look at patient satisfaction, which is important, without looking at provider satisfaction? No one had an answer. I haven't found the answer since, and I'm still seeking that answer. But when we are looking at a shortage of physicians, right? And we're looking at shortages of healthcare personnel across the board. And we're looking at these unprecedented levels of burnout with nurses in all levels, really all roles and all levels of healthcare. When that is so pervasive, why would we not be looking at things that can identify burnout early and ideally impact it positively, right? Redirect it, manage it, mitigate it. Why are we not doing that? I don't know. I think a lot of what we do can be boiled down to payer and how we get paid for what we do. But I don't think that this falls under that category. And I could definitely be wrong. I'm completely willing to be corrected on this. So if I am wrong, like again, comment, tell me, because this is an issue. And I don't know why we're letting it from the top down, from the administrative level, why we're letting it just sit there as an issue. And from the bottom up, from the grassroots, from the you and me of this, from the people who are actually out there doing the work, why are we willing to let them not look at the provider experience? We need to speak up for ourselves. We need to advocate for ourselves the way that we advocate for our patients, and support any initiatives that can get us closer to understanding the provider experience and assessing that baseline, that current baseline, before it gets any worse, that current baseline of the provider experience, so that we can take concrete steps to improve it. Because if it doesn't, we don't improve it, the prospects are terrible. It's not going to get any better. Burnout is going to increase. Patient satisfaction is going to be in the toilet because there's going to be nobody to take care of these people. Like it's a problem. It's an issue, right? So that is something that is on my mind, and I wanted to talk to you about that. I wanted to plant that seed with you this week, because that is such a major underpinning of what I do, right? it's so important to me that we look at these things and we talk about these things. My goal, my professional goal really is not to be an NP, right? It's not to help people. It's not to diagnose and treat conditions. That's part of what I do, but that's not like the why. That's not the core of it. The core of it is that I want to make the work world a better place to live, right? For clinicians. So I say NP because that's my training, that's my background, so that's the lens that I see it through. But these things apply to so many of us, really, and even I've been surprised at veterinarians that I've talked with who are experiencing much the same pressures that we have and much the same gaps in support, right? The pressure to do more with less, to work, ridiculous numbers of hours, unsustainable numbers of hours, and to not have that support and to not have that lens trained on them to say, what is the provider experience and where do we need to address things? So they're getting burnt out too. So it's not just people who are treating humans, right? So it's something that we owe it to ourselves and really to our patients by extension, to our profession, to the next generation, the next several generations of people in our professions to look at the provider experience, to speak up about the provider experience as a means of participating in making the work world a better place to live, right? For you, for me, for them, for patients, for everybody. Okay. So that's what's on my mind. Now I'm going to move into questions, and I have a whole bunch, but I'm going to pick just the one here. Um, oh, okay. I typically I typically get to work an hour before my first patient, and I still run behind all the time. What do I do? Okay. So first of all, know that you're not alone. This is very common. I advise against it. And there's a few different reasons. One of the first reasons that I would say, do not arrive an hour early each day for work is most of us are salaried, right? So the amount of money you're making is fixed. If you're coming in an hour early, then you are already stacking the deck so that you are giving your time for free to your employer. There's two ways you can look at it. You can either look at it as you are giving uncompensated time, so you're basically volunteering, right, for your employer, or you are reducing your rate. Because if you are salaried for, say, 40 hours a week, which is pretty typical, but you're coming in an hour early each day, then that's like 44, 45 hours a week that you're working, but paid for 40. That doesn't make sense, right? If you can offset it somewhere, if you can leave an hour early at the end of the day or something like that, then I guess it makes sense. But financially, that's a big one, right? So you're either diluting what you're making, which is not good, or you're giving your time away from free. No matter either way that you look at it, it's not good. So from the financial perspective, I don't advise it. Okay. But also, you're starting your day with a deficit. So if you come in an hour early, if your first patient is at 8 o'clock and you're coming in at 7 a.m., you are already, you may have work that you need to catch up on, right? Like I assume that's why. There's a couple of different ways that works. Some people are doing that to catch up on work, like leftover stuff from the day before, or like admin tasks, or they are prepping for that day, right? They're looking at their schedule for the day and maybe putting in orders. They see the annual physical at 10 o'clock, so they're ordering the mammogram and all this. And then I don't recommend that either. That's pre-charting. And if those patients don't show up, then you did that work for nothing. Right? So don't do that either. But you're also starting with your first patient with an empty tank or a reduced tank, maybe not empty, but you're kind of coming in less fresh than you could. And what are you gaining by coming in an hour early? Are there real gains there is no other way that you can do this, right? That's a question that you have to ask yourself. And the other thing is, I think that we sympathize too much with problems that aren't ours. If you have more work than you can get done and the amount of time that you have to do it, then there's a disparity. And is that because you don't know what you're doing? Maybe, not likely. Or is it because of something else? Is it something to do with the culture of your workplace? Is it something to do with the expectations of your employer or your colleagues or your patients? It's not necessarily your fault that you're not getting this work done. The expectations are probably not realistic. So if you're coming in an hour early each day, in addition to the reasons I've already mentioned, I would ask you, if I was your supervisor, why? What is that serving? There could be a good reason. I can't think of it. So I would rely on you to tell me what that reason is. Why are you coming in an hour early? And is there a better way that we could get that need met? So if you're coming in an hour early to finish the charts from the day before, to keep current with your charting, well, writing a chart is a relatively black and white thing. So maybe you need admin time or a little bit more admin time. If you get 2 hours a week, maybe you need 3 hours a week or 4 hours a week. If you have none, which has always been my case, then maybe you need like, 2 or something. I would look at that. If it is because you are prepping for the day, that's a lot of time to prep for the day, right? Are you really spending that full hour preparing for the day? Or is it something where it's really more about addressing your emotional needs, right? Maybe you have some anxiety. Is that possible? Is there anxiety about your day, about just seeing patients in general, or about the patients that you see in this setting? Maybe if you were in a different setting, you wouldn't do that, but these patients are, come in with 8 million things on their to-do list, or maybe you are relatively new in your career and so you're still kind of feeling like you want to sort of like cram before the test, right? Is that what it is? But that would be my first question, really, why? And whatever the reason is that you think you're doing this, or that the goal that you're trying to meet by doing this, then I would say, are you actually doing that? If you're coming in an hour early to finish the notes from yesterday, I'm hoping that that means that you left reasonably on time, within 30 minutes of the end of your last visit. And then I would also hope that it means that if you're coming in to get those notes done, that they're done in that hour. And I suspect they may not be, right? So it seems like this thing, like you're not going to get extra credit. There's no extra credit for doing this. The only people who know and notice and care that you come in early and you work late and you bring work home are your family and your friends. It's not going to get you extra points at work. It's not going to get you extra vacation time. All it's going to do is drain your battery a little bit faster, or maybe a lot faster, depending on the situation. So, what is your intention for doing that? And are you actually meeting that goal? If you're actually meeting that goal, okay. Then from there, you can look and see, is there another way that I could also meet this goal of closing my charts from the day before without having to spend this time? And that may be something like admin time that would be helpful and that would address that need. But I really, really, really think that we need to question why we do these things. I think that it's a slippery slope, right? It can very easily become the norm for you. It can very easily become the norm for your office, for your clinic, for your colleagues. And it's not really serving any beneficial purpose, right? If you, like in a worst case scenario, I've definitely had clients who have had like a threat of penalty for having too many charts open, right? And I've definitely seen people with truly 300 and 500 charts open, which is extreme. That's on the high end, right? Um, but I've seen people who've been kind of feeling like behind the eight ball, right? And so for that reason, they are taking measures to do these things. I don't know that this is the most sustainable measure. If you are very behind in your charting, right? If you've got more than 25 charts open, I would say then we need to look at this a little more closely. If that's the case, then we need to look at bigger picture things. 1 hour before you start seeing patients for the day is not a solution, it's a band-aid. So we need to look at the bigger picture things. Why are we this far off? And what kind of got us to this point? And if we kind of untie that knot and pick that apart, then we can come up with a solution that is sustainable, okay? That we can implement that is going to drive us away from this issue and keep us away from this issue, right? As opposed to just like swerving around the issue, which is what coming in an hour early every day is. So you really need to look at why this is an issue, right? Is this a short-term thing? Is this a big picture thing? And what is your goal for doing this? And are you successfully achieving that goal or not? Right? And if you need help with that, always let me know. I'm happy to help with those things. I love to talk about those things. I love to advise people on those things. That, I swear to God, that's why I exist, right? That's why I'm here. So definitely let me know that. But really question yourself. And at the same time, spend some time thinking about the provider experience, your experience as a provider, your office mate's experience as a provider, your collaborators' experience as a provider. What is the provider experience? Are we happy about it? Are we not happy about it? Where do we want to change it? And how do we want to kind of keep our finger on the pulse of it on a regular basis so that we can make things better in a way that sticks and in a way that is sustainable, right? So that it benefits us and then by extension benefits our patients. That is it for this week. Questions, comments, hit me up, comment below. Always send me a message if you've got questions and you can't make it live. Completely fine. I get it. It's a Tuesday afternoon. You may be seeing patients. You may be having a day off. All completely fine. Always can catch the replay. And if you have questions, send those to me and I will pick one and talk about the answer, the solution, or my proposed solution. Okay. And until next time.